Hello, welcome to Newscentre. With me, Parikshit Luthra. The Congress party is going to hold organizational polls on the 17th of October to elect a new president as it attempts to revive its sagging political fortunes. This will be the first time in 22 years that the party will elect a new president. The last time the grand old party held an election, Sonia Gandhi had beaten Jitendra Prasad by a massive margin to become the president. This time, none of the Gandhi family members are in the fray. However, many state Congress units have backed Rahul Gandhi's return as the Congress chief. Sources say Shashi Tharoor has received a go-ahead from Sonia Gandhi to run for the post. We also learned that Ashok Gehlot is likely to contest. Senior leader Jairam Ramesh has said that anybody is free to contest. It is an open process and no permission is required. We also learned that several senior leaders are considering running for the post as well. Let me go across now to Sandeep Shastri, Vice Chancellor at Jagran Lake City University, and political analyst Sanjay Jha. Sanjay Jha, how do you see the developments taking place so far? Shashi Tharoor, a member of the G23 group of leaders within the Congress party, meeting Sonia Gandhi. The meeting was portrayed as a way of taking her approval. Those sources are also saying that Shashi Tharoor was not seeking permission but wanted to actually gauge her mind, and Sonia Gandhi wants to have a free and competitive contest. She will be neutral in this entire development and she will not be putting forth any candidate as such. So these are the words coming in from the Congress party. How do you see these developments, first of all?
Parikshit, first and foremost, good evening to you and to my good friend Sandeep ji. My short point will be that these are very positive developments for the grand old party, which has been at the receiving end of a lot of electoral drubbing and organizational atrophy for a long time. There have been serious questions raised even on the leadership capabilities of the party over the last 8 years in particular. So I think one has to look at the what I call as the salutary ramifications of these steps being taken. What I want to say upfront is good that the Congress party is going to have a contest for the president. I know formally Shashi has not yet, announced his candidature, and probably you're going to see Mr. Gehlot being the candidate from, what I would call as the high command support. Either way, I think it's going to be a battle of narratives, and Mr. Gehlot and Dr. Tharoor will have their own idea of how the Congress ought to resurrect itself and take on the BJP and work for the larger concept of development and the idea of India. The flip side is that it also opens up, a lot of opportunities for other people who have been waiting in the wings, Parikshit. For example, in Rajasthan, assuming that Mr. Gehlot becomes the Congress president, Sachin Pilot will probably get what he deserved for a long time. And I think he's been just denied that opportunity on account of whatever political stalemate that was basically becoming a gridlock in Rajasthan. The other part also remains that Rahul Gandhi stepping out from being the Congress president will actually put an end to the BJP's, constant fusillade against the Congress, that it is a dynastic held party. In fact, the Congress could now attack the BJP for having more dynastic people in their party than the Congress itself. And I would think also you could see a lot of positive motivation and revival of what has been a very demoralized spirit within the Congress. Nothing like an election, a contest, a more transparent way to take the Congress party forward. I'm very hopeful. I'm not cynical at all.
All right. Sandeep Shastri, how do you think this election would be if you have Ashok Gehlot on one side, Shashi Tharoor on the other, and can Shashi Tharoor actually be called the G23 candidate? Because we also hear that the likes of Manish Tiwari, Siddaramaiah, Prithviraj Chavan, Bhupinder Singh Hooda, Anand Sharma are also considering contesting for this election, and the G23 is also having consultations among them.
Good evening, Parikshit, and it's wonderful to share the platform with Sanjay ji. I heard Sanjay ji out and he made a very persuasive argument. I would make a distinction between form and content. Are we seeing a real election, or are we seeing an election which would appear to be an election but is not an election? I think that's the question. I think one critical question which this election will call is, would we have somebody outside the Gandhi family now? because it seems as if Rahul Gandhi is not keen to contest. And if that happens, is there going to be a candidate officially or unofficially sponsored by the family? Indications seem to be at a formal level that may not happen. And you may have a contest between two individuals who are seen as just now Sanjay ji said, representing two narratives. But is it a simple question of two narratives is the question? And I'm coming to a larger issue. We have never had a serious election for a party president in the Congress party. The Congress has always believed in a consensus approach, because they have believed consensus is the way you maintain the unity of the party. Let's also remember that in this round, a lot of people are talking of the need for a consensus candidate to maintain the unity of the party. So with all this debate, I think it's still early days to say whether it will be a real contest or like Sonia Gandhi versus Jitendra Prasada, will it be just a formal contest? I think we have to wait and watch and see, but there is a definitiveness about at least some change happening in the Congress party if Rahul Gandhi is not going to be the candidate. How would Congress manage in a situation where somebody from the Gandhi family is not in the contest? Will it be a contest between somebody who is a representative of that family and somebody else? Now, all these questions will come up. And I don't think it is as simple as it appears to be. The Congress is in the throes of a change.
Right.
There is a move, at least on the part of the representative from the Gandhi family, to say, I'm not going to contest, in spite of all the pressures being put on him from the party. If he's able to withstand all those pressures and insist that there needs to be a contest, I think there are several layers of the onion which still have to be unpeeled. And I think it's still too early to say whether A, there will be a contest, and B, if there is a contest, is it going to be a serious contest, and C, what are the implications of this contest for the role of the Congress in the current politics of the country, especially vis-a-vis the BJP and also within the forces of the anti-BJP coalition.
Okay. All right. Let me get in Sanjay Jha back again. Sanjay Jha, taking a cue from what Mr. Shastri was pointing out, considering if Rahul Gandhi contests again, or this election seems to be for candidates who are supported by the High Command in one sense, what will be the reaction of the G23?
Parikshit, in my opinion, Rahul Gandhi is definitely not contesting for the post of the Congress president. If he does, I think Mr. Shastri is absolutely right. He will just win it hands down. It will be a no contest. The dichotomy that the Congress is battling within is, while the party is completely dedicated to the Gandhi brand, the country seems to be telling the Congress party that it's about time you brought in changes and experimented with the talent that you have, which is why I believe that if this is going to be a contest between two non-Gandhi people in Mr. Gehlot and Dr. Tharoor, or maybe as even some of the others, as you have speculated, it's good for democracy. Now, I quite understand, why, Sandeep ji is, feeling skeptical about the end outcome of the entire process. And that is largely because Congress has been, over the last 20 years, been very fossilized when it comes to organizational change, reform, or transformation. So, all those apprehensions are quite justified in a way. But I do believe that the Congress party is now pushing the envelope, because this has been an existential challenge for the party, if not a crisis. And end of day in politics, things can change. I can tell you this for a fact that this will definitely bring the narrative in the Congress's favor. Today, for example, no one can ignore that it is the only national party in India which is actually going to have a contest between people for the post of a president. And, this kind of a transparency and a lack of opacity is exactly what some of us have been asking the Congress to do. And secondly, I do believe that even if Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi are no longer the central organizational figures, they will still be star campaigners. They still are huge, owners of what I consider as one of the most powerful brands in India. And Rahul, as he's doing in the Bharat Jodo Yatra, for example, can become an ideological crusader for the party. Now, Parikshit, let me tell you this, there's a lot wrong with our country. And whether it's democracy, the threat to constitution, the whole illiberal elected autocracy culture that we have recently acquired, sectarian distrust, communal stress, the state of the economy, jobs, unemployment, inflation. There are serious problems. India's institutional emasculation is now legendary. Everyone is talking about it. And I do feel people want an alternative.
Right.
And the grand old party is in a best position to become a credible choice. But then people have also said that, if we can only vote for the Congress party, first they can look after themselves. And whether it's Shashi or Mr. Gehlot, I think the party is stepping forward. I mean, this is a time, I think, for the Congress to really ask itself, if I don't resurrect ourselves, then we cannot be out there battling against the very formidable force of the BJP, who doesn't, who have a take no prisoners approach.
Right.
Their Operation Lotus has now become the most, I would say, devious, diabolical political strategy of our times, where even elected governments are toppled. So I think there is a question mark here on democracy and the future of our country.
Right. To get in Sandeep Shastri once again. Sandeep Shastri, we're hearing strong messages in favor of Rahul Gandhi once again. More than 8 to 10 state Congress committees have backed his candidature. They want him to take the mantle of the Congress party once again. How do you see these demands coming in from different parts of the country? Will this have any impact on the Gandhi family?
See, I would look at it in two ways. One, you cannot shrug off the impact of past practices. The Congress has been used to backing somebody from the Gandhi family. So I think that remnants of the past continues to be there. Secondly, even if the Congress units believe that he is not going to contest, it requires them to make this statement that even though he finally does not contest, he is somebody we will all stand by. And this also, in a sense, sends the message that if Rahul Gandhi is not going to contest the election, which I think also, like Sanjay ji said, is eminently clear, whoever emerges in the contest, or ultimately, if you have a consensus candidate emerging, I think the larger looming figure of the Congress High Command will be there, something to see. And such strategic moves of appealing to him to take on the presidency, I think is part of that larger story that you see playing out. If you recall, when Sonia Gandhi decided not to take up the CLP leadership and pushed for Dr. Manmohan Singh to be the leader, you would recall that particular meeting of the Congress Parliamentary Party where leader after leader said, no, Sonia Gandhi should continue to be there. So it was more an assertion of loyalty to the party. And today also, if you see this happening for Rahul Gandhi, I think it is that culture, the remnants of that culture which continue. The question is, will the Congress High Command insist on that culture change? Or again, as I said earlier, is it more a change in form rather than change in content? Because if there is no change in content, I think it is old ways in a new form, which would mean no change at all.
All right. Let's see what happens by the end of the month and whether we have any nominations at all as well. Sanjay Jha, Sandeep Shastri, thank you very much for joining us here on Newscentre. We are going to head into a short break, but coming up, an exclusive conversation with Mahindra & Mahindra Managing Director and CEO Anish Shah on the company's growth plans, their EV output playbook and demand outlook. Much more coming up. Welcome back. You are watching CNBC-TV18. With us right now is the Managing Director and CEO of the Mahindra Group, Mr. Anish Shah. Mr. Shah, thank you very much for joining us. You have been focusing a lot on your growth gems. Let me start by asking about Mahindra Sustain. Ontario Teachers is set to acquire 30% stake for 2,371 crores. What was the strategy and what are these proceeds likely to be prioritized for?
So good morning, Parikshit. Great to be here with you today. This is actually a very exciting step forward for us. Ontario Teachers is one of the most respected pension funds around the world. They will bring a wealth of knowledge in renewables that will help us build this business. The objectives for us were to really establish Sustain as one of the top players in renewables in India. There is a huge market opportunity. Our Prime Minister has also talked about renewables being 50% of energy production by 2030, and therefore we feel that Sustain is very well positioned in this space. It does require capital, and in the context of our capital allocation approach, we have talked about growing growth gems, but also partnering with large marquee global investors in doing so. And therefore this is one where it meets the objective of us partnering with a marquee investor, helping us grow the business further and allowing the capital to come in, which then puts us on a faster path of growth and better returns. So it's a combination of all of those
Any
things.
key projects that you would like to focus on in the near term when it comes to Mahindra Sustain?
So there are multiple projects that we will bid for, as we have been bidding. Sustain actually is a business today which did both EPC as well as development. We've done more than 5 gigawatt, and the plan is to really take this at a different level. We've typically been bidding on a large number of projects, and that will continue.
Right. Just to also ask you about plans for other IPOs. In November 2021, you had said that in 2 years you'll come out with the next IPO. Have you identified any of your growth gems for an IPO, for a listing?
Yes. So to clarify first, 2 to 4 years, we've been very careful about what we commit and make sure we deliver what we commit. We are on track for multiple businesses to be on a very good growth path as part of our growth gems. And there are 2 or 3 businesses that we will look at bringing to IPO in that time period. But there's a little more work that needs to be done to make sure that they're really strong businesses when they come to the public markets.
Right. Would you like to tell us about those three, four businesses?
Not at this time, but we'll come back with more details on that.
Okay. Now, there have been a lot of reports about Mahindra Group looking to separate its automotive business into 3 parts. Will the EV, tractor and passenger vehicle businesses become standalone entities in order to unlock value?
So at this stage, the step we've taken with the EV co being separate is really the primary step. There are no plans in the short or medium term to look at any further separations as such. And we believe that with the new EV company that we are setting up with an investment from British International Investments, will really be a company that takes electric to the next level.
Right. Is Pininfarina likely to be clubbed with the EV project, with the EV company?
At this stage, we're not looking at clubbing Pininfarina with it. I think Pininfarina operates in a very different market with a different segment, and it does well at what it does.
Right. Just to ask about deploying additional capacity. When we spoke to you on the 15th of August, you said that your immediate priority would be to deploy additional capacity for the Scorpio, for the XUV700 and the Thar. What about acquiring the Talegaon plant? Mahindra Group was in initial talks with General Motors. Where have things reached?
So we continue to be in talks there as well as look at various options. For us, capacity creation is not as much about the plant. Our Chakan plant has the ability to expand and be able to put in more lines. It's about getting the entire supply base ready to be able to generate a lot more capacity for us. We're not looking at a 20-30% capacity increase. We're looking at far greater than that. And plans are set, things are underway at this point. We will be sharing it publicly once we have some of the uncertainties taken out.
But this is at existing plants.
Existing plants have lines. So as I said, expanding capacity is not an issue with our existing plants. Expanding capacity has to be done in conjunction with all the suppliers. They have got to put in extra lines, they've got to put in investments, get the machining tools in. So once all of that happens, that allows us to take capacity to the next level.
But either acquiring Talegaon or Ford's plant in Tamil Nadu, that remains on the table as an option?
So it's not essential for us to acquire plants to do this at this point. So while we will continue looking at various options, that's not the gating factor for capacity expansion for us. That's more a longer term plan. Okay. Because we will need, beyond the set of capacity that we need right now, we will need more capacity for our EVs once it comes in.
All right.
So those are longer term options beyond that. At this point in time, our capacity expansion is not contingent on acquiring any plants.
Okay. How geared up are you for the festive season production? What is the current capacity utilization?
100%. We have huge demand, as you know, across all our models, and therefore our capacity is fully utilized, and we are expanding capacity. We may have some of that in the next few months, but then more in a few months beyond that.
Will this demand sustain itself beyond the festive season?
At this stage, if you look at the XUV700, we've been getting 10 to 11,000 bookings for the last year. So it's one that is really driven by the product. Similar with the Scorpio N, we had, as you know, 1 lakh bookings in the first 30 minutes, and there continues to be very high demand for that, which again is driven by the product. So is it with the Thar, with the XUV300. So we don't see this demand going down. In fact, as we put in more capacity, we would likely see it going up because we can serve the capacity, or we can serve the demand faster. Today, the challenge we have, and the one thing that we are unhappy about, is we can't meet customer demand as quickly as we'd like to. That's what we need to address.
Right. The pressure of high raw material costs, especially steel, iron ore, rubber, there has been some cooling off in prices. Do you think things are coming under control? The prices are stabilizing, commodity prices are stabilizing, or would there be more price hikes in the offing in the coming few months?
We have seen some stability on that front, though we do continue to be concerned with the inflation worries around the world, because India is not going to be left out of that. We also feel that the government actually has taken a number of proactive steps, and which is why we see a greater level of stability in India today.
I'd also like to ask you about your continuous focus on cost efficiencies amid this challenging global economic environment. Where do you think India is with regard to inflation? Is this the peak, or you think that things could get worse in the days to come? What are the major headwinds that you see for the Indian economy?
So India is today positioned much better than the rest of the world. The increase in inflation in India is 150 to 200 basis points as compared to a much higher increase we see in many of the developed markets. That has been a factor of proactive actions, both in terms of rate hikes by the RBI, in terms of addressing some of the input costs by a variety of measures. And based on that, we do feel that that stability will likely remain unless we see much greater inflation around the world. We also see the US Fed and various other central banks focused on this as a huge topic. We will likely see higher rates in many countries. And if that's done aggressively, that will help keep the world in control, which will help India. The other factor here is crude oil prices. And if you look at oil prices, they have gone up, they've stabilized again to some extent. But that's going to be a key factor in driving where India goes as well.
Right. My final set of questions, which are some of your other businesses which are likely to post strong growth? What about Mahindra Logistics, Mahindra Holidays? Any other areas, any other sectors where you expect the companies to deliver strong growth in this fiscal?
So today, we have all our businesses firing on all cylinders. So if we look at auto, we talked about that great momentum. Our farm business continues to do very well with growth drivers in farm machinery and global as well. Mahindra Finance is on a very strong recovery path. Tech Mahindra is taking advantage of many of the tailwinds behind it and addressing some of the issues around margin that we need to address there. Holidays, life spaces, logistics, all doing very well. Life spaces business actually hit $1 billion of market cap just a couple of weeks ago. So one of our first growth gems to hit that mark. And many of our other growth gems will be hitting that mark in the next 2 to 4 years.
So maybe Mahindra Life Spaces would be the first for an IPO.
Life Spaces is public actually.
Public.
So yeah. Some of the unlisted entities will come up for IPO as well. Yeah. But we wanted to get 3 of our public entities, Life Spaces, Logistics and Holidays, also to the 1 billion mark. So we've started on that journey.
Okay. And my final question on electric vehicles. You recently launched the XUV E400. What has been the response in terms of bookings? And we've also seen Tata Motors now announcing an affordable EV, which would be less than 13 lakhs. Is that something that Mahindra would also consider, maybe an affordable EV as a next option? Or would you go with the roadmap of the 5-6 cars that you've showcased?
So the response we've got is fantastic so far. We haven't started bookings as yet, So once we start booking, we'll see. But the XUV400 is best in class in a very large number of areas. So we do expect that to really garner a fair degree of demand.
All right. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Mr. Shah.
Glad to be here, Parikshit.
All right. So that was Anish Shah speaking to CNBC-TV18, speaking to us about the global economic environment and the strong tailwinds that they see for the automotive businesses and the other businesses of the Mahindra Group.